We are biased for Africa. We believe that we need to innovate for Africa.
Hi everyone, I'm Sabine Van der Linden. I run Venture Labs under the name of Alchemy Crew.
My name is Tunji Andrews, founder and CEO at Awabara.
You need to have products that are simple enough that someone that's never bought insurance before can understand them in a 2-minute phone call.
2014, Nigeria's first insurtech platform was formed, Moto Genius.
I believe there's a huge opportunity to reshape the narrative of insurance.
This is Arun Iyer, founder and CEO of Alpha Direct.
Dr. Neto, founder and CEO of Wella Health.
My name is Benton. I'm the founder and CEO of MTech.
This is Glo, the CTO at Pineapple.
This is Herman from Austria, Managing Director of Assurance.
So join us for the new season of InsurTech Business Series podcast. Fresh conversations on InsurTech in Africa. Subscribe now.
We always bring you great conversations around the insurance industry, the challenges, the opportunities. And today we have an exciting conversation ahead of us, looking at the future of the space. We're going to be diving into some of the realities of insurance and innovation in the African continent. And I'm joined today by two incredible guests. They are very much involved in shaping the future of the insurance industry today from two different angles. Without further ado, welcome Dr. Neto. Welcome, Rehab.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to be here again. Always look forward to the conversations we have. Ruffle a few feathers in the process.
Yeah. Yes. Rehab, he has the habit of shaking tables. Welcome, Rehab.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here to discuss the dynamics of insurance in Africa.
Awesome. Dr. Neto, you're a friend of the house, but give us a brief about your journey and who exactly is Dr. Neto. Are you even a real doctor?
I'm a fake doctor. That's a good thing. So yes, I'm a doctor. Yes, a trained internal medicine physician. Started to look into health insurance about 6 years ago and try to figure out how to provide affordable healthcare, using insurance as a tool. Currently, I founder and CEO of Wella Health. We provide affordable micro health insurance that covers common conditions like malaria, delivered via network of community pharmacies in Nigeria and telemedicine. We have Pan-African aspirations, so looking at expanding across Africa and always thinking about how we can use insurance as a tool to improve healthcare access. And that's an important lens because I'm not an insurance practitioner. For me, insurance is a tool. And because of that outsider lens, I'm able to challenge some of the traditional ways of approach or thinking about insurance and change the status quo, because before I arrived on the scene, insurance penetration wasn't great. So people in the industry, if we're being honest, need some help from outsiders like me. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Rehab.
I am actually an insurance practitioner, but similar to Dr. Neto, I've had the privilege of working outside insurance. So, the other side of me is that I'm actually an agronomist. I studied agriculture in university and did my professional papers in insurance in parallel. So I don't know whether to say I am an agronomist or an insurance. But I would say I have benefited greatly from the exposure I've had in agriculture, working in the field. But most of my career actually has been in agriculture insurance. But my roles tended to be, the field work, collaborating with partners, product design, all the way to managing one of the agriculture product designers in Africa. And now transitioned to Busara. Well, I would say it's about 4 years ago when I transitioned. I kept feeling that while we were developing products and talking to farmers, there was something we were missing. And for me, it was this constant feeling that we were not doing anything about understanding the other side, why customers were not buying the products, why there seemed to have been like a mismatch between what we were providing and the reaction we were seeing. So that's when I transitioned to behavior science, and I'm enjoying the journey so far. So what I do at Busara is lead our risk management and insurance team, where we are conducting research in this particular area. So we like to say that we are reimagining insurance with at-risk communities. So it's sort of like a ground-up approach where most of our time should be spent in the field, talking to people. And our interest is not just low-income people. I would say anyone we would consider to be underserved by insurance. And the goal is then to bring what we're learning to insurance companies so that we influence the type of products and processes that are available so that we can see more people benefiting from asset protection and insurance solutions.
You mentioned a number of things there in terms of the markets that some of your work, basically speaks to, and we'll get to some of those things a lot more later on. But I just want us to start on this note, and I'll stick with you, Rahab. If you had to describe the African insurance landscape, I mean, you've been a player in the space, and now you're working with Busara doing research. If you had to describe the African insurance landscape in one word, what would that be and why?
Evolving.
Okay.
I can think of a couple of negative words, but I prefer to stick with a positive. So evolving.
Thank you.
And basically what I see is that the landscape is changing. So there's more players entering into the market, technology. I mean, with AI, every day could look different. And then when we look at how technology then is changing consumers and how we live our lives, how we interact with products and brands. When we think about Gen Zs have just got into the workforce, and so they're at an age where they're consuming insurance products, and how basically they've been shaped by technology. I would say then the industry is evolving. And there's a long way to go, but I feel like there's a real sense of movement and potential.
Yeah, I like that. Dr. Neto?
I think for me, I would say opportunities, So when I look out, all I can see, is opportunity. And similar to what Rahab has said, you can have a negative lens and think it's difficult. But the reality is that a lot of the growth in insurance globally is going to happen in Africa. The European market is saturating, if not already saturated. The American market, similarly. Asia has accounted for a lot of the growth in recent past. The only place where there is a measurable opportunity to grow, it's only in Africa. And that's why you've seen all the global insurers have entered the market. And so for me, I just think opportunity.
Very, very interesting. And I like that you mentioned the point on reality. Let's set the stage. Imagine a Nigerian trader in Ikpori, in Lagos, who loses her shop to a fire incident, or a border rider in Kenya, in Nairobi, who gets into an accident. How often do people in these kind of situations actually have insurance? And why do you think many people perhaps don't even think insurance is necessary?
We saw this actively, actually, in our instance. So we work with over 2,000 community pharmacies. They are independent small businesses. So a good representation of, at least a segment of the, small business ecosystem in Nigeria, and also fairly educated. So pharmacists would go to university for at least 5 years. They'd have a year's worth of an internship as well. So by the time they come to own a shop, they're one of the most educated, business owners you can find. But we actually surveyed, the pharmacies in our network, and we found that less than 20% of them actually have business insurance. And we found actually, so what led to that survey was there was a pharmacy in our network who actually had his shop. In fact, 2 pharmacies, I'll say both of them, had their shops burnt down in a riot. So this was back in 2020. So shops burnt down, lost a lot of value, and the result was contrasting in that one of them had insurance and the other one didn't. And for us, it was very clear. So obviously, the one that had insurance, was able to get some support to, get back on their feet. And the one that didn't, struggled significantly. And so for us, it was a clear lesson about what insurance can do for these small businesses, even though lots of them don't have it. And I guess we can talk about this more as we go on, but we actually went on and we provide an embedded insurance product to these small business owners, these pharmacies. And that story is the way we actually promote the adoption of it. So to answer your question, less than 20% of businesses in our network have insurance, and it's a challenge to get them to adopt.
So Rahab, why do Africans see insurance as luxury rather than necessity. I know that you're playing in the research space, so I'm very curious to learn about your thoughts on this. Is it a culture thing, trust, financial literacy? What have you learned? What are you seeing?
Thanks. Maybe just borrowing your previous question around the Boda Boda to bring up the point here. If I were to meet a Boda Boda rider in Nairobi, if they have insurance, it would be the compulsory motor vehicle insurance because the law requires it. And there are also many instances where they actually manage to get away without it, or they hope to get away without having insurance. And so I think this is part of what underpins our lived experience, where people feel like insurance is not something that you must have. It's something that you can do without, that there are other, let's say, mechanisms, especially informal mechanisms, that we consider to be our insurance. So one position we are taking as a research team in this area is to say, maybe let's take a step back and look at, could it be that for many people, insurance is almost like a process of managing risk, and already people have quite a robust portfolio of mechanisms that they have in place for coping with this kind of risk. So we assume that the only way to deal with these risks is through buying an insurance product. But our lived experience shows that people will, for example, fall back on family and friends for help. They'll be part of some kind of a small group where they can borrow, and this group also comes through when a member is in trouble, when they've had a death or they're hospitalized, and these are all things that are playing the role of insurance, because they're sort of helping you to get back on your feet, to recover after an event. So I feel like in a social society like ours in Africa, culture plays and beliefs plays a big role in how we perceive insurance. There's some work we are currently doing where we're using an insurance game, a board game, to talk about insurance, and then use that actually as a tool for research to see how people behave and how they actually think about insurance. And one of the interesting things that comes up in the game, because we're playing this game with, I would say, middle-aged women who are part of savings groups, and especially in rural areas. And people will often make the comment, "Oh, I didn't know that we have these other types of insurance products," or "I didn't know there are so many insurance products," or "I didn't know that someone like me can buy this kind of product." So there's something there happening in our cultural beliefs. There's also, I think, a layered issue of financial literacy that could be, stopping people from having the adequate knowledge about the products and how to actually use them. I don't believe that majority of people don't know what insurance is, but it's more that they haven't figured out what solution they need, which one fits their needs, where to start from, whether they can afford, because that's a big concern for people, affordability. Because for most people, they feel that when they sign up for an insurance product, they're getting into this kind of program where there has to be monthly deductions, and that's not how their income works. So that feels like you're overcommitting to something. So if there was a way to reassure them about flexibility, flexible processes of payments, but also on the other hand, we see also the reality that a lot of African people are in debt. So if you offer very flexible processes, you also see a lot of default. So it's a tricky one, but I would say there is a significant trust gap between potential customers and insurance providers, and between insurance providers and potential customers. So there's no straightforward answer. It's a complicated issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Nito, she touched on a number of things there. And one of the things that comes out when, you're talking about the level of penetration of insurance across the continent, or maybe in Nigeria specifically, for example, is trust, right? What are your thoughts on this? And perhaps how are you tackling that, as Wella Health?
Trust is very key, and I'd say it's probably one of the biggest barriers to insurance adoption. But I think about it, now this is my own personal framework, and Rehab might differ, but I think about it in terms of layers, in that trust, I think, is the kind of topmost layer. And that really only is a conversation when what I feel like the two more fundamental things exist. And I think the bottom layer is really affordability. I think that until the insurance products that are available are affordable, it's very difficult to even start a conversation. People need to be able to afford the product, because it means then that they can actually pull it into their lives. There's no point somebody trusting an insurance company, but then they can't afford the product, So I feel like trust is kind of later on. The basis of the foundation is affordability, first of all. And then once you have the affordability, then you've gotten some credibility to start to educate people. So even before trust, I feel like people need a baseline financial knowledge, not just general knowledge, because like I said, with pharmacies, for instance, they're quite educated, but it's still a financial knowledge that is lacking. So we need to systematically educate people on the role insurance can play. And you can see how if they are affordable products, then the education makes sense, because there's no point educating people. And then when you now say, okay, this sounds like a product I need, give me one. And then it's way outside what they can realistically afford. Then you've kind of lost credibility. It's like, well, why are you telling me all of this when, look at it, so expensive? So first, affordability. Next, invest in the education, and then finally build trust. And the way you build trust is by paying claims. And I'll give you an example of this. We went on, so following that experience with pharmacies, we went on to provide an embedded insurance product. So the pharmacies we work with actually pay us a small subscription fee. As part of the benefits of that fee, we gave them free insurance. So for fire and theft, if I recall right. So they didn't need to pay anything extra. They've already qualified for it. They, already everything sorted. All they needed to do was to provide us with a couple of data points so that they can, be the cover can apply. So even though you had access, you didn't have to pay anything. You still had to, give us some data points. And out of 2,000, less than 1% of them actually accepted, to do that work to give us the information. So in this instance, it's not an affordability problem because it's paid for. Maybe there's a bit of an education problem there, but certainly there's a trust barrier, because when we went ahead to talk to them about it, they said, we don't believe that this thing will actually work, and I think that's where trust comes. And the way you solve that is by you're ultimately paying claims.
Yeah. One of the things that is very clear in the future in driving a more insured Africa is InsurTech, right? So the concept of InsurTech, tech players coming to play within the insurance industry, innovators coming to invest their time and their resources within the space to solve some of the challenges that we have within the insurance value chain, right? You spoke about a concept that you're leveraging, for example, at Wella Health, embedded insurance and digital approach to offering insurance, right? I remember we were on a panel, I think at the Nigerian FinTech Week a couple of years ago, and the topic around embedded insurance came up. And the general consensus really is that embedded insurance is, quote unquote, the messiah. You had a different opinion.
My opinions are evolving. As you can imagine. Okay. No, they're evolving, and I think I think the reality is there isn't a holy grail. I think when we start to look for messiahs, as you put it, it can mislead us and lead us away from the reality that we have multiple segments, multiple types of markets, multiple products. So it's obvious there isn't just one way.
Right.
And I think embedded, has its potential. But I think that having, interactions with individuals, again, when I look at a lot of the research, a lot of the data, especially when, you have to educate people and build trust, that ability to interact, one-on-one with people, I think makes a lot of difference. And in fact, I was looking at Google put out this research on work that people do prior to buying a product. But essentially, they were trying to show that before people purchase a product, they usually do a lot of work themselves. And a lot of times it takes about 11 touch points for that person to actually convert. And when they broke it up by industry, they looked at insurance. And insurance, the biggest factor that affected whether a customer would buy the insurance product or not was whether they had spoken to somebody beforehand. So there's something about insurance and building trust where a human connection really makes a difference. And so I think the challenge with embedded models is, they can lose that human component. So the embedded models that we do, we try to still infuse a human component that educates and builds trust. Because the challenge sometimes is, sure, you might, embed it and cover a lot of people, but eventually you're going to get some churn and then, you lose that value.
Getting them to really understand what the insurance is actually doing and how they can leverage it. Rahab, from your work on behavioral insights and all, what are the most surprising things that you've learned or seen as to why people do or do not buy insurance, especially in Africa?
So maybe just contributing a little bit to the comment, to the discussion you just had now on embedded. My feeling is that embedded insurance is great at bringing people through the door, introducing people to insurance, but it's not great at keeping them as customers, because unless, especially insurance providers, are intentional about now onboarding these customers. So, for example, if insurance has been embedded on, let's say, agricultural inputs, because my world is actually agricultural insurance, if the insurer is not proactive and intentional about then onboarding this customer who was, who bought, let's say, fertilizer or seeds that came with insurance, then this person may never even notice that there was insurance. And there could be even an information session to let them know that the package comes with insurance, but they don't get to experience insurance. They don't get to actually transition and become the customer of the insurance company. So I feel like that's one challenge that we have with embedded models, where we're assuming this is a low touch model. We're just going to have customers coming through this pipeline, and we don't have to invest in building this, that interaction or engagement. But I would say if nothing is done about engaging with these customers, then there's no trust building. They're not actually insurance customers per se. They did not choose to buy insurance. But also going back to the comments Dr. Neto made about affordability first, and then you deal with trust. I actually don't disagree, only that I see that it's not a linear process. The way our minds work is that as you're getting to test the product, you're also wondering whether you trust it. And so rather than waiting to the end, to do it in phases and then build trust, you can already incorporate signals, mechanisms that signal trust in your process right at the beginning. So mechanisms like personalized interactions, what you just said, that people really want that interaction with a human at the beginning. And also because this is a nuanced issue with other generations, that is likely to change. But for the most part, what we know about customers is that because it's a complex product, it's you're not sure if you're making the right choice, then talking to someone is like a shortcut for making that decision. And the other thing that is similar to talking to someone is receiving a recommendation. So because people's minds at that point are overwhelmed, they're not sure what product to choose, which company to go with. Information looks similar. So having a recommendation, if you're doing like online sales, then providing a recommendation helps people to make that choice quickly. Your other question was what we've found to be surprising. I would say we're still a long way from understanding really what the choices people are making about their money, how they choose to spend their money, and also how this is connected to their aspirations, their identity, and because these are like the building block of why, who decides they're going to insure versus someone who decides they can stay without it, and risk aversion, this kind of, I would say, characteristics that make who we are. Often we find that when people, on one hand, we are saying when someone is considering buying insurance, they don't know where to start. And that choice overload is overwhelming and makes, it leads to inaction. So if you think about someone's journey, even just as Dr. Neto said, they might have had to do a lot of search online, and maybe they're looking at who have I had who can I, is it based on a company I've heard about from, and they look at reviews. There's so much information to look at, which can actually lead to inaction. But also when you think about the typical insurance process as we have it, if it's an outbound activation, so if an insurance company is reaching out to people and telling them to buy insurance, that's what I'm calling outbound. That process tends to, it's almost like set up to fail because one, it lacks urgency. Nothing has happened to me yet to make me feel that I need insurance today. I'm not waking up wanting to buy insurance. And the risk and bad things that could happen is not top of mind because we are naturally very optimistic. So we are always thinking that bad things are not going to happen to us. And so there's no natural, I would say, fit for that conversation as a starting point for a conversation about insurance. And this is why I think you often hear that what people's experience of an insurance salesperson is just talking about death, them telling them when you die, your family, this and that will happen to your family.
Yeah.
So there's no appropriate conversation starter for an insurance conversation. Unless we think about, for example, a risk assessment or, certain questions, maybe it's like at least 3 or 5 questions that you ask that make someone to get into that zone where they are willing to consider this. So, for example, this is why we've used games in the work that I mentioned, because through games, they actually...
What's the name of the game, by the way?
It's Resilient Me by AB and Peers. So this is a Kenyan company that has designed a board game. I believe they designed this from some work they did in Ghana, and that game has been played across Africa in different settings. So we worked with them to sort of tailor a specific context within the group, those savings groups, and that we could use it as a tool for research. And exactly for the same reason that we were trying to figure out how do you start that conversation about insurance in a way that doesn't already put off people, doesn't have them being very defensive, because even just the mention of the word insurance already gets
absolutely
people defensive. So if there was a tool that can be used that helps people, that brings the salience of those events that could actually occur, then people are more willing to consider. So when you think about it on the other side, on the customer side, someone who is in hospital to visit a loved one is already in that mindset where they're thinking insurance is actually important. And I know it sounds unethical, but I would say that that's actually a good time to provide information about insurance.
Interesting.
Now they're ready for it. Someone who's just lost their crop from drought is ready to listen because the salience of the event is very high. Also, the timing matters, but because we can't wait until everyone is to someone so that we can talk to them about insurance. We have to then start thinking about how do you recreate that in their mind so that they are willing to connect about this conversation. So bringing them into scenarios where individuals are likely to consider to protect themselves against such vulnerabilities.
Very interesting thing that Rehab said, and somehow I'm seeing embedded insurance, but more like being more intentional about storytelling.
Hi, this is Richard Leftley from the Microinsurance Company. I'm getting in touch from the UK today, and it's great to be with you. I think the message I want to share is that insurance for low-income people is really, really difficult to get working properly. It's really a distribution challenge, and finding a way to partner with other organizations in order to reach scale rapidly is essential if you want to have a breakthrough. Good luck in doing that, and I hope to cross paths with many of you in the future.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, so I think the storytelling is really important, and crafting multiple stories. I think you need like excellent marketers. Yeah. And I think that's actually traditionally what perhaps insurance hasn't gotten right, is really skilled marketing people that can tell great stories that people can relate to. Because as Rahab says, the best time to try to sell insurance is just when somebody has had a loss. But if you wait till, people have losses, you're not going to sell a lot of insurance.
Yeah.
So the storytelling is really, really key to get into people's minds. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've painted a good picture of the realities of today, right? And stepping into the future is the fact that there's a role for technology, there's a role for innovation, there's a role for really doing things differently and approaching things differently. And I want us to look at some hard truths from the insurer side, from the insurtech side. What's holding us back? And I want to start off with this question, right? Let's say we are launching a new insurtech product. Wella Health is going to the market today. What's the number one challenge that we would face?
Yeah, great question. And it's tough to answer because everything is problematic, to be honest. I think there are challenges everywhere, from regulation, for instance, that can be a challenge, to the underwriters just being inflexible and being traditional. So if you want an innovative product, finding the right partner that will be willing to take that risk with you, to be a bit more permissive. Because the reality is, the sorts of products, at least in my estimation and experience, limited experience, the sorts of products that will be appealing to customers are not really the sorts of products that insurance companies have traditionally created and sold. And because of they're afraid that the loss ratios, and things like that. They're really afraid of that. So that's often a barrier to even start with innovation at all. But my response always is, you'll never know until you try. You need a certain budget, and this is where the capital comes in. Patience and smart capital can give the budget for experiments. Because the reality is that, of course, yes, some products will not do well. There's no doubt about it. I'm never going to promise an insurer that, this product is going to sell and you make a lot of money. I can't say that. We don't have the data, we don't have the experience. So that's where the patient capital comes in, is, okay, do we have access to capital that can allow us to do certain experiments such that we are not really too focused on a profitable product, but more on learning and iterating? Because the reality is the first iteration is probably not going to be right. Maybe the second, not even.
Yeah.
But when you embed those learnings and you continue to iterate, by the time you get to a fourth or fifth iteration, you would have lost a lot of money, but you're now positioned to grow. So access to that patient capital, I think, is also a challenge. And then outside of that, there's the, usual challenges of talent. I spoke about marketing and storytelling within the insurance industry is very limiting. It's very straight jackets, corporate suit wearing kind of people in insurance. And that's not always compatible with, storytelling that is alive and engaging. So that's also a challenge. So everything, I guess.
Yes, Rahab, from your work and even from your experience in the insurance space and your work with Busora currently, I'm sure you've worked with insurers and you've worked with insurers who are looking to innovate, they're looking to veer off this is how we've always done it route. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen that they are facing?
So from my perspective, insurance companies are not building new products every day. So even when we talk about innovation, in most cases, it's going to be about packaging. How motor insurance, for example, is priced is not going to inherently change. It doesn't shift that drastically. So a lot of times what's happening is product packaging is what is changing. And so from my perspective, the main work to be done is a communication campaign. It's bridging the gap between the insurer and the customers. I don't see yet a lot of message testing, for example. I don't see insurance companies concerned about what is the best way to communicate what we are providing? What is the best way to make sure that customers understand our offering? So, for example, we've had interactions with insurance companies that will say, we're doing the latest and the best innovations. We're doing pharmacy first, we're doing telemedicine. We're having a challenge with uptake. And when you look at it, in one of those examples, actually, we had a laugh with one of the insurance companies because I said, we are one of their clients, and I wasn't aware they were offering that. So if they were assuming they have reached every customer and people are just not, signing up for these things, this is there's a high chance people are not even aware. So I feel like there's a lot of work that needs to be done in figuring out how to communicate. And this is not about advertisement. It's more about persuasion. It's about what is it an insurance agent does different from what technology or a computer can do for you. What is that combination of factors that make a message compelling and that will connect with people? So the other example I could give is that we like talking about women as a potential area, a frontier for insurance. And our assumption then is that women are the same, that women want the same things. But the reality is that women is not one group. Young women will be different from older women. So there are sub-segments, and doing the work to understand what are those segments, what do they care about, what does that mean for my insurance offering, what is the packaging and the framing of the message. The underlying product might not even need to change, but it's about how are you framing it and positioning it and placing it in front of your potential customer, so that it makes sense to them. I feel like there's a lot of work to be done there. It doesn't sound like a lot to do with innovation and tech, but I think that there's a long way to go, in connecting with humans.
Absolutely. And I agree with what you said and how we position what we offer and telling our story. Right? We do a lot, even from the things that we've done so far as an industry, but we don't tell our stories well enough. And I think there's definitely room for change and improvement on that side. At the beginning of the conversation, we heard evolving, we heard opportunities. So 2030, 5 years from now, what's the future of insurance in Africa? Let's look at that. And I'll start with Rahab. How do we get Africans to want insurance rather than seeing it as luxury, as obligation?
By 2030, I envision a more inclusive and accessible insurance landscape. I imagine a vision where organizations who are not insurance providers are going to be players in the same space. And I think we're already starting to see that. That organizations who have done the work to understand their customers will see that they don't need to be insurance customers to offer the solution because they can see that there's a gap. And the one who has done the work to build trust and understand their customers is going to have a much easier time just adding one more license to offer them insurance. And so I feel like accessibility and even the more technology changes, I feel the more people want to be understood, the more people want personalized offerings, they want transparent offerings, they want to feel that insurance companies are going above and beyond, that not only being transparent, but that they're not just in it for the business. So I think often we feel like the house wins, like no matter what you do, the insurance company will always win. But they want to feel that they're in a setup where it's a fair transaction, that they can rely on, and it's a predictable type of situation or scenario you're getting into. So often people feel that they shy away from insurance because they feel like they're getting into a game that they don't understand. They don't understand the rules of the game. They don't feel like that they have control over what's happening.
They're set up to lose somehow, some way.
Exactly, because the cards are against them, because the one coming up with the rules is also the one offering you the solution, deciding whether to pay you, when to pay you, and so on. So one of the things we are working on actually is what would it take, understanding or researching what would it take for more mutuals? Like would this be a more social, inclusive method of doing insurance, where insurance is part of a communal solution where people are sharing risk, but of course beyond the network effect of people coming together and pooling their funds, there's of course like proper actuarial services needed, and you'd have to build their capacity to actually manage insurance type of solutions. But it's almost like the more things change, the more we go back to what worked in the past. But it will be interesting to see how things evolve by 2030 for sure. So easy to understand products is what people are looking for. Solutions that connect with people, and solutions that I guess facilitate more, how their lives look like right now. And our lives as Africans are very intertwined with
communal,
helping each other and being there for each other. So if there was a way for insurance to provide a solution there while not taking that away from us, the socialness, I think it would be more, it would fit better with our lifestyle.
Great one. I've heard some thoughts around mutuals, right? And, the whole concept around Ubuntu, as a Zulu word, and really just that communal approach to, which is what insurance is really. Dr. Neto, 2030, what does the industry look like in the insurance industry generally, and maybe in InsurTech as well?
I'm really bullish. I see a lot of opportunity. If you say go back to 5 years ago, the landscape was very different. There were not that many insurtechs. The regulators were not really looking at insurtech much. Insurance companies themselves, were not that interested. Investors, not too forced. But you can see how things have really turned around in 5 years. And I feel like all that investment, knowledge, experience is going to compound such that, over the next 5 years, you're going to see a lot of increased adoption. And some of the things we've discussed here are ongoing conversations in multiple rooms, multiple boardrooms, multiple companies, across the continent. So I'm really optimistic that, we can really create the right products that have the right value propositions that are very well positioned and packaged and are poised for scale, And I think also what is happening is that other enterprises are maturing and looking at how insurance can provide a value-added benefit for them and their ecosystem. So speaking about mobile money, for instance, a lot of those players in, fintech start to look towards, insurance options, even telcos. I say even, FMCG. I think, as people look to extract more value, insurance starts to be a tool that people look to, as a value-added option. So I'm really, really, bullish for what the future holds, because we've done a lot of work over the last 5 years. So I think all of that compound and bring growth.
Absolutely, and I agree with you as well. Rehab, I know that recently coming to you because it's from Kenya, Safaricom looking to play within that space. I know you alluded to that a bit when you were speaking. They really pushed a lot within the payment space, and that has been a success. Coming into the insurance industry, trying to do something similar. I mean, do you have any thoughts on how successful that can be?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's not just telcos like Safaricom. We'd also need to think about banks themselves. They hold a lot of our data. They know a lot about us. That adding insurance would be easy for them. If you think about utility companies like electricity companies as well, I think that it should be possible. We haven't seen many of them interested in this space, but I would say they have a lot of our information as well. They know where you live. They know how much you're utilizing. And it's possible actually to embed insurance in some of these solutions. So I think that the infrastructure they already have and the kind of data. If you think of data also as an asset, there's a lot of information they have about our behavior, about payment patterns, or based on let's say where you live, how much you earn, your gender, when you receive your income, these kind of things. If you put them together, I think there is information, really rich information that can start painting a picture about people's profiles. Of course, humans are more complex than that. Just knowing that information does not guarantee that people will buy just any product you put to them.
Yeah.
But I think that it means that you have maybe you have a platform already for them to interact and engage with you. The trust dividend is already there, as opposed to an insurance company who has nothing else on this person and they have to start from far to build up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this also emphasizes the point around collaboration. We need to leverage a lot of collaboration to drive or grow the market. If there are people out there that want to reach out, want to partner, they want to collaborate, and do business with you, where and how can they reach out? So, Donato, how can they reach out to you, Wella Health?
Yeah, so on all socials, it's Wella Health. So you can reach out to us, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Myself, I live on Twitter a fair bit, and I'm at Doc Neto.
Yeah.
I'm also at LinkedIn as well. Yes.
You can't miss him on Twitter, by the way. Rehab.
So for Busara, the best place to start would be our website. So this is busara.global, and we are also Busara on all our socials. You can also reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Like Neto, I live on LinkedIn, not Twitter, but I live on LinkedIn. So you can Rahab Karaoke on LinkedIn.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure too.
Thank you.